they kill and eat all the native fish and just eat everything that's in the ponds.
It's really fun, and we use bread to catch the fish. All you have to do, you have to throw out your bait, which is usually bread, and then you have to watch the bread underneath, and when you see it wiggling, you don't get it in straight away, you wait till it drags it underwater, then you start reeling it in really fast. But you do have to be careful because they do have spikes.
Look, for all the community who's taken part in the event, thank you for coming down and supporting us and be part of it. For all our supporting partners and all the local businesses that have given us donations, I'm not going to read out a list because I may miss someone, but it's a significant amount of businesses and associations who have supported us. So again, thank you to you all. And I'd just encourage more people to get involved. And when we're doing this again, come down, great place to spend the day with the kids, and we end up with a good environmental outcome at the same time.
Last year she won the comp, so at age 4 she won, so I forget how big the fish was, but it was the one, we only caught one, but that's all we needed for her to win the comp, so she was very happy.
Shake hands. Thank you very much, and thanks for being part of the tilapia tournament.
Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which this meeting is being held and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Councillors, do we have any apologies? Mr Goodman is listed as an apology. I also mentioned that Councillor Millwood is not present in the room today, but she is participating in this council meeting via teleconference. Welcome, Councillor Millwood.
Good morning, everybody.
Any further apologies? If not, I'll move on to the Declaration of Conflict of Interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Councillors, are there any conflicts to declare?
No.
Councillor Farinelli.
Mr Mayor, I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 4.6, alleged inappropriate conduct by Mayor Mark Nolan, and as such I will leave the room and not take part in discussions or the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Farinelli. I also have a declarable conflict at 4.6 and I will leave the room of my own volition at that point.
Through you, Mr Chairman, I've received notification as required under the Act from Councillor Farinelli and yourself. And through you, Mr Chairman, and we may speak a little more about this later, a recent desktop audit has been conducted by, allow me to call it, the local government department. One of the issues raised was that the department would like to see some clarity as to why councillors are leaving the room if they are declarable conflicts of interest. I note you said that you're leaving of your own volition. I assume, Councillor Farinelli, that you are doing so of your own volition as well. Well, you're agreeing with me, so yeah.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Mr CEO. We move on to item 1, confirmation of the minutes. Would somebody move though a true and accurate record, please? Moved by Councillor.
Through the chair, before we move the minutes, may I get an amendment put into those minutes, please?
Sure.
So an amendment to be made in item 3.1 in the agenda from local government meeting 23rd of the 3rd 2021, in that I actually did declare a conflict of interest in the assessment of the grants and took no part in the allocation of funds to the Silkwood Target Clay Club, and this has been noted in the officer's report. I'd just like that to be noted. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think that's not an amendment to the minutes per se, but rather just an addition for the record. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if we're going to, while we're in this space, there is a slight typo in item 7.12, which is in general business. It was about the donation given to the Girringan Rangers of a firefighting unit. The minutes actually state that myself and Councillor Chewy travelled to Cardwell. The presentation was made at the Tully Depot on that day. So it's just a clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that clarification. That's been noted by Ms Sands.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chairman, that'll be the resolution. Therefore, would be that the minutes be accepted as a true and correct record with that amendment. Yep.
Okay, so would somebody move it? That's a true
Further to, I will move the minutes as a true and accurate record.
Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? It's carried unanimously.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Carried unanimously. We move on to item 2. Any business arising from the previous minutes? Any business arising, councillors?
No.
Okay, we move on to item 3, community and culture. 3.1, page 29, Mission Beach Library meeting room fees and charges. And Ms Brennan will present this report. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Ms Brennan.
Councillors. The new spaces at Mission Beach Library are open and available, and this report is a proposal for the fees for the meeting room space. So the recommendation is that Council adopt the proposed fees and charges for the Mission Beach Library as outlined in this report. The background is that Mission Beach Library is of course being refurbished at the moment. With the population growth and the door count ever increasing there, it's a really good space for both travellers and locals to use this space. It's a fully serviced, it's got a TV screen and Wi-Fi connectivity. It will be booked out as part of our normal process for meeting rooms. It's also got a coffee machine. And it's got access to a kitchenette as well. So the fees are in line with all of the meeting rooms of a similar size across the region, incidentally including the CDC, but that's just for the customer experience across the entire region. You know what you're getting. I'll just go through the Mission Beach ones just so so it's on the record. The full session in Mission Beach Library meeting room space will be $170. The half session will be, so 4 hours, $105. For any functions that are held within this space, $210 includes the setup fee, and an hourly rate applies of $30. Excuse me.
Thank you, Ms Brennan. Any questions for Ms Brennan? Councillor Chewy.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms Brennan. I think Mission Beach community are looking forward to this new refurbished space very much. I would like to question, though, the hourly rate. I'm hoping that there will be some consideration for non-for-profit groups in the area, particularly, I don't know, if there was a Australian-based program, it might be different, but if we have our local Girl Guides or Boy Scouts that wanted to use the facility, I hope that we would put some consideration into the $30 per hour rate, because for those small groups, I think that is quite a considerable amount to pay for a meeting room. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Any further questions or comments?
Well, just in answer to any not-for-profit groups or registered charities is a 50% reduction in all fees. And as part of their application process, they submit the documentation. So they've obviously got some kind of receipt from the ATO or anything just listing what their organisation is. And that discount is processed as part of the booking room.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions or comments, councillors? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We move on to item 4, governance, environment and finance. 4.1, page 31, review of the procurement policy, and Mr Vic will present this report. Parramatta supporter.
Good win on the
Smiling, big smile. Welcome.
Good morning, all. The local government regulation requires council to review its procurement policy annually. Council's current policy was reviewed and adopted in July 2020. Council has indicated that one of its key objectives is to support the proactive support of local businesses to ensure jobs in the Cassowary Coast region. This policy is intended to provide clarity in relation to procurement activity undertaken to ensure the development of local competitive suppliers directly supporting and contributing to the development of the Cassowary Coast community. Council has a requirement under the Local Government Act to ensure financial stability and shows regard to sound contracting principles when entering into a contract for the supply of goods or services and the carrying out of work. The sound contracting principles are as follows: value for money, open and effective competition, the development of competitive local business and industry, environmental protection, and ethical behaviour and fair dealing. The review of the policy is undertaken as a requirement under the Act and regulation and to take into consideration Council's position in relation to purchasing locally wherever possible. The intent of the buy locally objective is to boost opportunities for local businesses when councils procure goods and services and the carrying out of work. Any questions?
Councillors, any questions for the officer?
No.
Councillor Barnes?
Yes, good. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I think this is council's biggest risk to our business, this policy, and I think as councillors we all know that this has got to be done right. All right, because we need to be trusted by the community, and I'm not really in favour of the recommendations because I can see a fair few flaws here. If you move to page 33, you can see towards the bottom, it says the potential increase resulting from the introduction of a new policy has been factored into the medium and long-term financial planning. Well, nothing is stated there of the cost to council. It's just telling us there could be costs. I think that's very much a grey area. Medium and long-term, it's very fuzzy. I think we need to be briefed a little bit more on that. Also, when you turn to page 38, it's got definition. When you go through there, if you go from the top, it says, it's pretty self-explanatory. It says Cassowary Coast local government area, goes down, down, down. There's nowhere it says Queensland bases or Brisbane. It says Queensland local government areas, it says regional. Most companies have a major headquarters in Brisbane. I don't see that stated. When you turn to the next page, page 40, I think the days of petty cash are nearly gone. If you ask any business owner, he'll say he's had biggest trouble with staff is around cash. We live in a pretty much of an IT society now. We've got cards. I think petty cash has got to be dealt with. I think this whole thing needs a bit more talking to. I feel very sorry for one staff member who hit a brick wall recently on a verbal quote. It's not fair to himself. It's embarrassing to the business owner also that's involved. I think with the technology now with emails and texts, I think the verbal quote should be deleted. You know, it's too fuzzy. I said, he said, and then you change the job description. It's not fair on our staff. I do feel sorry for our staff. These aren't big requests I'm asking. They're only little twigs. And also, when you go down to the fourth one, it says purchases valued at greater than 1,000 and less than 3,000. We're still going to verbal. What's an email? It's not hard. If anyone who can't do it, come to me and I'll show them how to do one. Or even a text. It's so simple. And that way we've got a paper trail of some description. Does any other councillor feel like myself? Thank you.
We might let Mr Vic answer some of those queries first, if you don't mind, Councillor Barnes. The first one on the bottom, page 33, the long-term financial planning and the risk to it. Do you want to?
Sorry, I've only just got the procurement policy in front of me. I could probably get more clarification from Gobinder on that one.
Gobinder, you're going to come up. Mr. Singh, come up and explain a bit for us. Thank you.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
Councillors, just in relation to the policy itself, I'll just start off with the questions around petty cash and also around the $1,000 threshold. So when we come up with those thresholds, we do a lot of consultation within council, and also we look at our local suppliers. So potentially the $30 is a figure that we have come up with, which is a reduction from $80, which we had previously, and that is something that we have reduced last year. The intent behind that, again, is at the moment we still do have staff who don't have credit cards. We haven't got credit cards to all staff. We don't encourage that at the moment, mainly because it will require a financial delegation to be given to all staff, which will mean all staff across council will probably end up with a financial delegation of at least $3,000. So the way we are managing it is, if it's a small transaction and if it only requires $3 or $4 and it's just a walk to a shop to pick up something quickly, they go in, pick it up and then come back and use petty cash. But if there are staff within the building who have access to a credit card, they do use credit cards. So it's a case of something where if there is an individual who doesn't have a credit card, then they use it. But if there are individuals who have credit cards, they use it. And it's a reduction from previous years. In relation to $1,000 threshold and asking for verbal codes, so one of the biggest challenges that the team has here is a lot of our local suppliers actually don't use technology. They are still submitting us paper-based invoices. A lot of them are not geared up to even bother emailing us or sending us written codes. So when the staff actually asks for codes from local suppliers, a lot of them take a lot of time to actually bother in terms of responding to us via an email. And for some of the smaller quotation figures, it's easier for the staff to get it over phone, which is why we have, with $1,000 and below, only one verbal code. And that is purely based on us looking at our historical transaction listing in terms of how and the frequency of how quickly we can get codes. And also at the same time, we don't want to be holding up staff by asking them to go to multiple suppliers where the amount is less than $1,000, because if we go to 3 or 4 suppliers asking for a quotation below $1,000, it may take them 3 or 4 weeks to get all the quotations in. So that's why you can see there's different tiers. And when we look at the threshold tiers, we actually go back and look at our spend within those tiers, and then what is the risk and exposure to council. And generally what happens is a lot of the smaller value transactions at the moment actually linked to our, and most of them are actually covered through our preferred supplier arrangements. So whereby if it's stationery, we have PSAs in place where we have designated suppliers that we buy stuff from. If it's below $1,000, a lot of the items are in stores, so we do use our stores. So the quantum of transaction that happens in that range is very minimal, and we do have visibility over that. In relation to the other thresholds, again, we have done it on the basis, again, based on risk and looking at what is the quantum of transactions. In relation to the policy itself, so obviously we have workshopped this policy a couple of times with councillors using the definition of local suppliers. So what we have said in that case is suppliers with head office within the Cassowary Coast get a 10% rating. Suppliers with a branch office in the Cassowary Coast is 6 out of 10. The reason why we tried creating a bit of distinction was there were some other major organizations which actually didn't have their head office based in the Cassowary Coast, but still had just the branches based here. They still employ locals, but what we tried to do there was create a bit more distinction between people who actually had the head office here and we actually genuine local suppliers who do a lot of work for us in the region. So that's why we tried to create that distinction. Previously that rating was actually 8, so we have reduced that from 8 to 6. We haven't done it this year, it was actually done the year before. In relation to supplier within an office in the FNQ Rock region, so we actually have reduced it a lot and brought it down to 3. So the intent is to, again, just focus on the top 2 tiers, which is the head office and the branch office in the Cassowary Coast, and try and promote more local spend. And as part of our strategy going forward, and something that we have discussed with councillors, we are looking at doing more work behind the scenes in terms of trying to come up with other ways of encouraging local suppliers and contractors and how we develop them more. So there is a fair bit of work, and that is why we haven't actually gone into too much depth of updating this policy itself, because of the work that we know we are doing to encourage more local growth in terms of businesses, and also how we can encourage more of our local contractors to work with council and deliver more of our capital and operational projects. So that is something that we are doing. In relation to the policy and its impact on the medium and the long-term financial planning, so one of the things we are mindful of is we actually, when we do a lot of our modelling, we continue to look at how the policy influences our ability to reduce cost going forward. So generally, what we haven't been able to do is actually reap out some of the benefits that we hope to draw out from this policy. So generally, one of the things we try and do is actually look at the trend in terms of what our local spend is, and how we can actually increase our spend locally. So we haven't been able to do that in the medium and the long term. And the reason for that is we are still hoping that the additional work that Dave Goodman and his team are working on will then actually give us a better picture of where we can sit in the medium and the longer term. So that's where we haven't done a lot of that analysis at the moment. But in terms of the short-term analysis, so what we do is we do go in and look at our monthly local spend. So we do keep a track of how much we are spending locally, where we are spending locally, and then also look at what are we actually buying locally and what we are not buying locally, to be able to then go back and say, okay, how can we encourage some of our locals to start either distributing some of those things or actually sourcing some of that stuff for us. But the challenge is, what we find is there's a lack of capacity in the market, or also there are occasions where because of our lack of technical expertise, sometimes locally it can hinder our local spend. So this is where it's a fine balance between local spend and or non-local spend. So again, we are working towards it. So councillors, like the policy itself, like Brett said, there hasn't been any changes from the previous year. So there has been only 2 minor changes. And in terms of the questions asked, I'm hoping that may have answered some of the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Councillor Farinelli.
Just through the chair, I mean, I acknowledge some of the concerns you've got, Deputy Mayor, but my understanding is a lot of those issues you've raised, we've actually already adopted the policy. That's not part of the change in this policy, is it? It's very minor. There's some very minor changes in that. And although some of the issues you raised are quite genuine, this policy is, and those issues, we've already adopted it. So that's a resolution of council, this policy as it stands, and the changes that have been made here are extremely minor, and they're highlighted in red. So around conflict of interest, declarable and prescribed being adjusted in there, and then how we advertise is also being changed. So we're really only adopting those minor changes to an existing policy, aren't we?
Yes. Just through the chair, if I may, councils also, like, what we also acknowledge as part of this is that we are anticipating major changes going forward. So, and unfortunately, those changes are not something that we can implement at this point in time. There's still a lot of work being done, and it may actually take us another 12 months to get those changes in the policy. So what will happen most likely is the revised version of the policy will actually include and address some of the concerns raised today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Singh. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand Barry's concerns, yes. I understand Kylie's point of view as well. These are very minimal. I think the most important message to take out of this recommendation today is our continuing support for local business, and with the other programs that we're running in the background about the support and the encouraging local business to get involved with the council, and we support them in that process and be part of it. Barry, most of the concerns you brought up were raised in the implications, which I think is at least is showing that we are aware of what issues may come up. And as we move forward, I mean, this policy gets reviewed every year. We need to review it every year. But as we move forward, building capacity within our local region, there may be some significant changes come forward in the future. But again, understand your concerns, Barry. Agree with you, Councillor Farinelli. And further to, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Yeah, it's moved by Councillor Bain, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. The minor changes are all about weighting and methodology, and I'm comfortable with the changes. We did discuss them in the workshop. As Mr Singh has indicated, there's going to be a bigger policy change in the next 12 months, so a number of the concerns that you've raised, Councillor Barnes, will be reflected in that new document, that new draft. Yeah, I'm happy for this matter to be put to the vote. Be moved and seconded. All in favour?
Yes.
Carried. Against? 6-1. Reflect that Councillor Barnes had voted against the recommendation. Thank you, Mr Vick.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to item 4.2, page 45, ISR Property Protection Insurance Principles. And Ms Slattery will present this report.
Good morning,
Morning.
everybody. Okay. Okay, so council staff undertake an annual insurance renewal and declaration process in relation to various insurance policies. There's a list of the different policies that council have within the officer's report. One of those policies is the property protection policy, the ISR policy. That is the biggest dollar value of all of those policies. Focus for the 2021-22 renewal process is to work with council to decide on key principles in relation to the asset declaration values. In terms of background, so the property protection or the ISR policy, it covers all buildings, property, water and sewage plants, pump stations, park equipment and lighting, amongst other things. So the Council's Enterprise Risk Management Framework identifies Council's risk appetite and consequence matrix for financial stability. When we are considering the risk-based approach to insurance cover, we need to review the Enterprise Risk Management Framework, and it's been identified that a large number of minor assets are currently being insured for replacement value. So there's a list of principles which I'll outline in a minute, but the adoption of these principles will mean the removal of a significant number of assets from the existing insured asset values. It doesn't mean that council will not replace the asset. It simply means that it will replace the assets from either its own source of revenue, reserves, or extending funding if available. So the key principles that we are looking for council to adopt is that in relation to council's declared asset values for its ISR policy, insurance renewal is that it must be a council-owned asset. For a legal requirement for insurance coverage, it might be a contractual requirement, it might be a heritage listed asset, it might be within the funding agreement, that the asset must be a key operational facility, for example, waste, water, sewage, a depot, an admin building, or the disaster coordination centre. It must be a key community asset for major centres, for example, the Innisfail, Tully, Mission Beach and Cardwell major centres. It must be an aquatic facility and library, and it must be a regional district parks. The second element of the recommendation is to align the insurance excess or the deductible levels in line with the Enterprise Risk Management Framework. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the officer on that report? I'd just like to make a supplementary comment. We're very supportive of asset rationalisation, and our staff are actively involved at that level at the moment with community groups and organisations, and part of that agenda is to reduce the pressure on costs to council in relation to insurance and depreciation. I see this policy fitting in perfectly with what we're trying to achieve through asset rationalisation. and for that reason I'm prepared to move the recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Farinelli. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Baines.
Well, and just further to your comments, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it is important. We're all concerned in our region and nationally, and if not internationally, about the increasing of insurance premiums and the impost that it places upon us. An important piece to reiterate is we're not saying we're not going to replace these assets. A lot of them, and it's sitting within this space. We already have the depreciated funds sitting there to allow us to. So, you know, is there any great benefit to us insuring them for replacement value per se? So, I mean, I tend to agree. And just adding that further comment, great piece of work, good piece around asset rationalisation, and if we can find savings within our insurable list of assets, I think that's something we ought to pursue avidly.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Baines. We have a mover and a seconder. All in favour? Carried. Yep. Councillor Millwood, you're on board? Yep. It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. We now move on to item 4.3, page 47, policy review. Ms Slattery will present this report.
Okay, so yes, back into the policy space. So there is a list of policies that we've reviewed. Some of these policies need to be adopted annually as part of the local government requirements. So the policies within your pack that we've reviewed is the advertising spending policy. It's required to review this policy on an annual basis. There are minor adjustments to that policy. We've just added some additional information around the social media platforms that the council utilises. The track changes are within the officer report. The next policy that we've reviewed is the council meeting standing orders and procedures. Last meeting there was, I guess, some discussion around leave of absence. So on the basis of that, we've added some additional wording to actually identify and define what a leave of absence is, and then what the requirements are for councillors to notify council of a leave of absence. So what the actual wording is within the draft policy is that councillor must apply for leave in writing to the CEO 2 weeks prior to the commencement of the leave. The leave request will be submitted to council for a decision by resolution at the next available ordinary council meeting. Where leave is required due to an emergent situation, the councillor may apply in writing to the mayor for an interim approval until a council decision can be formally resolved. Where the leave involves the mayor, the CEO can approve the leave until a council decision can be formally resolved. So that's some additional wording proposed for that policy. The next one included in the report is the expense reimbursement for councillors. That is a policy that also needs to be annually reviewed. There are no changes to that policy. The next two are the public interest disclosure policy and guidelines. So this has been reviewed to ensure compliance with legislation and includes some additional changes around the Human Rights Act, and it includes reference to the Office of the Independent Assessor in terms of them being a body for which we're required to report to. And the last policy is the use of social media. So there is a new clause that's been added and drafted to cover administration guidelines. So effectively, what those change in wording is, additional wording is to basically to add council as a co-administrator to councillors' social media pages. And the wording is included in your pack. Is there any feedback or
Ms.
questions?
Slattery. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Farinelli.
Through the chair, just with regards to the use of social media, if this policy is adopted, I'll be removing my Facebook page. I don't agree with council being administrator of my page. I will find another way to engage with my constituents, and then we'll anticipate the introduction of a new policy that affects that engagement possibly. I'm aware of one new member in our comms department, and I do wonder, is this person there purely to monitor our pages and provide, I mean, you had said that what is going to be monitored is how many times we like a post, we comment on a post, we share a post, we make a post. Does that relate just to if there is a councillor page, or that relates also to our personal pages as well?
Oh, definitely not your personal page. So your councillor presence. So your councillor Facebook or social media, whatever social media platform that you use. So, and it's just, so I guess to give some backstory to why, we're going down this path, or proposing to go down this path is, last year, one of the internal audits that the council undertook was around social media, and that there were various recommendations coming out of that internal report. And when it was tabled to the audit committee, one of the requests was to actually do a compliance report around councillor social media activity. Currently, we don't have any visibility apart from what we see from a public point of view. So to help give that compliance, visibility and transparency in terms of activities that councillors, do around social media, this is an avenue to give us that ability to have a look.
Further to that, yeah, I anticipated that response. So I actually have a copy of the audit committee report, as I am on the audit committee.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the document I have is titled confidential agenda items, so it's probably very little that I can say other than nowhere does it say about council taking over administration of councillor Facebook pages. And in fact, as part of the report that was provided by Pacifica, there were 2 council social media guidelines that were provided in the report. One was, and they're public, social media guide, so I will talk to those. One was Whitsunday Regional Council. Nowhere in there does it say about council taking over administration of councillor Facebook pages. The other council social media guide was provided by the City of Whitehorse, and in fact in theirs it says 5.3 in the guidelines, it is councillors' responsibility to manage their social media accounts. So this was all provided as a background to the report provided to the audit committee. So as far as the recommendation by Pacifica to the audit committee, I can find nowhere other than there were some options put up by you with ways forward, but nowhere was council taking over administration of social media accounts made as a recommendation by Pacifica as part of that audit.
And that's right. I guess the provision of those social media policies was just a guideline and an example of what other social media policies are there. I guess one point I want to make is that the wording provided in the draft policy is not, the intention is not to take over administration of councillors' Facebook social media. It is to be a co-administrator. You guys will own your content and how you manage those pages. It's just to give us some transparency. Like I said, and reporting, capability, because at the moment we have limited capability.
Councillor Maines.
I was going to say, I think that's a very important point to raise, thank you, Mr Chair, is that this is not about council administering councillors' pages. Councillors will administer their pages themselves. There is a co-administration or monitoring piece, and it's about the transparency so that we can report on what's going on in our social media space.
Yeah.
There's people around getting themselves in trouble with social media, and we don't need to be in that space. I mean, all councillors are very responsible and very aware of their social media presence, as they ought be, but the organisation also needs line of sight so that we can report when we're questioned on it.
And I guess, some of the councillors already have that co-administration with council already, so that's, that's, I guess, already happening within the organisation. This is just making a formal request for that to happen. And I guess the other comment that you just made in terms of a new staff member starting in comms and is their role to monitor Councillors' Facebook page, that's incorrect comment.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms Slattery, and thank you, Councillor Baines. I believe the vehicle that we're looking at today is something that is required to measure compliance, and co-administration is the vehicle. Ms Slattery is required by the Audit Committee to produce a report to reflect whether we are compliant or not, and she needs some mechanism to do it, and this is the mechanism if it's adopted today. Any further comments, councillors? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Councillor Millwood?
Yes, I haven't got a problem with it.
Okay, so that's 6-1. Councillor Farinelli against. Thank you. We move on to item 4.4, page 119, policy adoption, local law making policy. Ms Slattery.
Back again.
Back again.
All right. So we've carved this local law making policy out separate to the other policies that we reviewed, because in the next agenda item we will be talking about local laws. So there's a copy of the marked up version of the policy. There's only one change within the policy, that is to add in an additional step to the process. So we're required for the local laws to get a state interest checked. And that has been captured in as part of that change. So I'll just read out the recommendation as per the officer's report. It is recommended that Council, for the purpose of Section 29(1) of the Local Government Act, resolve to adopt a process for making each local law of the local government as detailed by Local Law Policy ORG 019. The process applies to the making of each local law that is a model local law, and each other local law, and each local law that is a subordinate local law, and each interim local law. Second point is, pursuant to Section 257 of the Local Government Act, resolve to delegate to the Mayor and the CEO of Council its power under Section 38 of the Act and Section 15 of the Local Government legislation to identify a provision in the model local law, other local law or subordinate local law as a provision creating a barrier to entry to a market or competition within a market. And then item 3, pursuant to Section 257 of the Local Government Act, resolve to delegate authority to the Mayor and the CEO of Council to deal with all minor administrative amendments to the model local laws, other local laws, subordinate local laws or interim local laws.
Thank you, Ms Slattery. Any questions for the officer on that report? I've just got a clarification. Number 2,
yes.
Entry to a market or competition within a market. Could you give us a bit of an explanation around that, please?
Is that something you can help me with, James?
CEO. Item 2. Entry to a market or competition within a market.
Yeah, can I take that one on notice, Mr. Chairman?
Take it on notice? Okay. Any further questions or queries, councillors? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried.
Yeah.
Councillor Millwood? Yep. Unanimous. Yep. Thank you. 4.5, page 130, adoption of a new local law. Ms Slattery.
Okay. So contained within your papers is a list of the draft local laws that councillors and council staff have been working on over the last 12 months. So it's been, from what I understand, the last time the review that was done was back in 2008. So this has been identified as one of the key items wanting to be carried out within the operational plan. There are 13 local laws that are contained within your papers, and there are 5 subordinate local laws contained within the pack. I don't propose to go through all of them unless there's any questions, but we would like to recommend that Council, under the local law making policy dated today, are resolved to propose to make each proposed local law attached to this report as Appendix 1 and each of the proposed subordinate local laws attached to this report as Appendix 2, to consult with relevant government entities about the overall state interest in the proposed local laws in Appendix 1, and then refer the proposed local laws to the Governor in Queensland under the Statutory Instrument Act, outlining that the Governor in Council has a right to disapprove or otherwise allow any part of the law. Just want to strike out number 5 because that's actually a repeat of number 3 there. Is also to consult with the public about the proposed local laws in Appendix 1 and the subordinate local laws in Appendix 2 for at least 21 days and comply with the procedures prescribed under the regulation for the review of anti-competitive provisions for the proposed local laws in Appendix 1 and the proposed subordinate local laws in Appendix 2. And to accept and consider every properly made submission about the proposed local laws in Appendix 1 and the proposed subordinate local laws in Appendix 2. And that Council resolved to require a status report to be provided to it following the completion of the state interest check, the public consultation and the public interest test report. Happy to take questions. Actually, just before I take questions, I just want to make note that in the pack, under subordinate local law number 4, page 34, there in the table of contents, there's just some referencing errors, which we'll need to fix up before we submit it to the state interest for checking.
Thank you. Councillor Pavement.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Morning, Ms. Slattery. Public consultation on these local laws, when does that look like it will take effect?
So we need to send it to the state for their interest check. The feedback we're getting at the moment, and so I can't really give you a definite time, but the feedback that we're getting, it might take between 1 and 3 months.
Happy with that, Councillor Pavement? It's got to go to the state first and then it'll come back. Any further questions? Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm reading in here that we need to have public consultation for at least 21 days, that's correct?
Correct.
How are we going to get all our constituents to have input into this? What process do you think we should be going through? And I think that this law is very much linked to our planning law, and we've seen plenty of changes in our planning laws. They come through yearly, and it looks like that we haven't touched this law for many a year. I think it'd be good if we took it on as a council to probably review this a little bit more often, or maybe when the town planning law gets changed, we address it at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Just a clarification, Ms. Slattery, in the recommendation when you were reading it, local law making policy ORG 019, dated today, you said. It's actually dated.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yes.
So did we put the 8th of April in there?
Yes,
yep.
please.
Thank you. Can that be picked up without an amendment? Yep.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Any further comments or questions?
Yes, I do need to answer yours, correct. So within the local law policy that we just adopted, it actually outlines in terms of what the public consultation process looks like. So we need to do a notice out to the public, and at least in a newspaper circulate generally the information about the local area. We need to display the notice around government's public office. We need to make it obviously available to come in for an inspection. So we'll obviously one of our platforms of communication is through our website, through our our Facebook page, etc. So once that process is can be underway, we can communicate to the community to participate. Does that answer your question?
Yes, just one more. Just on behalf of all the councillors, do you think it'd be possible that we could get seed into a little bit of information that's coming across your desk as it's coming through?
As in, oh, okay. As in, like, yeah. I mean, I don't think that as the feedback comes through we can do that. I mean, the consultation period is only for a 21-day period, but if you are wanting to see what's coming through, obviously we have a CIS on a weekly basis now, so we can provide that information as it comes through.
Okay, any further questions or queries? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Dewey, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Councillor Millwood?
Yes.
That's unanimous, thank you. We now move on to item 4.6, alleged inappropriate conduct by Mayor Mark Nolan. I'll leave the room of my own volition and ask Councillor Barnes to take the chair.
Through the chair, I'll also leave the room for item 4.6 of my own volition.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
This report will be given by Kelly.
Okay, so on the 8th of February, the OIA received a complaint about the conduct of Mayor Mark Nolan when he attended an annual general meeting of the Tropical Coast Tourism Board on the 3rd of December and advised the TCT Board about Council's replacement representative to the Board. It is alleged by advising the TCT Board about Council's replacement representative to the Board that it contravened a resolution of the local government by communicating a decision about a matter which required a Council resolution before Council had considered the matter. The OIA referred this complaint to the Council to be dealt with and included a recommendation that the Council refer the matter to an external investigator. Wise Workplace was appointed by the Council to investigate the complaint. The investigation has now concluded and an investigation report prepared by Wise Workplace has been provided to councillors on a confidential basis. Under the natural justice process, the Mayor was told of the case against him, including evidence obtained, and was provided with an opportunity to put his case in writing, which he has done, and that's been provided to the deciding councillors.
Good, thank you. Are you complete?
No, not yet. Okay, so in terms of the evidence gathered, there were various interviews conducted by Wise Workplace. Based on the probability, the findings of the investigator is that the allegation was substantiated, and the investigator provided a recommendation. And the recommendation by the investigator was pursuant to section 150AH of the Local Government Act, that the council could consider ordering a reprimand to the Mayor for the conduct.
Good, thank you very much.
Do you want me to read the recommendation?
Yeah, I'd like you to read the recommendation. I think every councillor is aware of it.
So this is just the recommendation from the Office of the Report, is that the Council consider the contents of the investigation report and 1, determine whether or not Council agrees with the analysis provided within the report in deciding whether the Mayor has engaged in inappropriate conduct, and 2, if Council decides that the Mayor has engaged in inappropriate conduct, determine what action Council will take to discipline the Mayor.
Thank you. Right, we have the recommendation. Would we have any councillor wishing to speak for the recommendation firstly? Councillor Purvin?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I'll be voting in favour of the recommendation, and the recommendation would also include what the assessor has put forward into what we should, how we should discipline the Mayor.
Good, thank you. Before we ask those to speak against, anyone else for the motion? Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councillor Purvin. I think the investigation was pretty clear. There's a recommendation on the table from the investigator, and I would be supportive of the following the similar process we have in our previous.
Thank you. Councillor Chewy?
Yeah, I would also like to support the recommendation as we have done in previous cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Millwood?
Yeah, no, I'm going against the recommendation. I'm going against the recommendation. In my opinion, it is not in line with the disciplinary action guidelines that we have been provided from the OIA, and I feel that all reprimands should be based on this set of guidelines so that there is no bias to anyone.
Thank you. very much, Councillor Millwood. Well, is there any more discussion for or against? I think we've got 5 councillors in the room. We've had 4 councillors pass their opinion. I'm now going to put it to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation, show of hands.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll move it.
I'm sorry, a mover, Councillor Purvin, seconder, Councillor Baines. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And I'd say that Councillor Millwood would be against. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. I'm voting against the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may. So what...
Moving the recommendation that the Mayor be reprimanded?
Well, there's 2 parts of it through you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just seeking clarification. The first part is that I believe that Council has just resolved that the Mayor has engaged in inappropriate behaviour and has decided, pursuant to Section 150AH of the Act, that an order be made reprimanding the Mayor for the conduct. They're the 2 parts of the resolution as I understand it.
Yep. That's correct.
I agree.
Okay, all councillors agree, Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
With your permission, I'll go and get the
Thank you.
councillors.
Thank you for taking the chair for that session, Councillor Barnes. We're back to the agenda. Item 5, general business. Any general business items, councillors? Councillor Chewy.
Yes, could I invite Mr. Fisher to the table, please? Morning, Mr. Fisher. I have 2 questions, please, which I'm hoping you could give some clarity on. We know that Dunk Island Spit has changed positions. If you could give us an update on how we as a council are moving forward with that. And also, if we could please have an update on the shade sale for Mission Beach Pool, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, councillors. Through the chair.
Morning.
Councillors, in regard to Dunk Island Spit, we've appointed a caretaker to take care of the island there for a period of at least 12 weeks. That will see the island operated as it has in the past. And in that time, what we will do is position ourselves to go back to market. I think it's certainly working with the team, we really see this as an opportunity to reflect on a couple of processes that have been run there on the island now. I think we need to reflect on the market and the condition of the market and understand, seek to understand council's objectives, the market conditions, and then set up our tender process to really hone in on the key elements of what we see there and really focus on limiting the risks that we have seen occur on a couple of occasions now, and understanding that risk and seeking to understand and manage it more through that procurement or that leasing advertising exercise. So we do hope to be in a position to call leases in the next month or so. We are really mindful of the fact that we need to be proactive, but I guess I do want to set the expectation that we want to make sure that that the the process is robust, that, so we can really hopefully see a long-term outcome that is more assured and can really be a strong point moving forward for the region. It is such an important asset and such an opportunity to get right. In regards to the Mission Beach shade sale, we have conducted a procurement exercise where we've sought some prices from suppliers locally and a couple from Cairns. To date, we haven't been able to come up with a solution that fits within our budget. I guess what we're seeing, as you see in our monthly reports on building, there is a huge demand on building services at the moment, and that is flowing through to the pricing we have. We believe it's flowing through the pricing we've seen. Just as of this morning, I've been talking to another local builder, and I'm also talking to another couple of other companies more broadly, Cairns and Townsville, to seek some views on that shade sale. I do hope that within the next week or two I've got some firmer pricing that fits within our budget, and then obviously can provide another update there. But I guess we are very conscious of the need to deliver a value for money outcome. While we could sign up, and deliver something that's potentially not value for money, I think it's important to understand that market. Thankfully, we're coming into the cooler period of the year as well, so I apologise to the community that we didn't get it done for summer, but there's an opportunity to make sure that we get a value for money outcome and ready for next year. So,
before we get off the Dunk Island spit, sure, Mr. Fisher, commercial reality was out of our control with Experience Co and Mayfair, and ratepayers bore the cost. Can you please ensure in the next lease that we do have a bond to protect our ratepayers? There's an appetite from the 7 councillors for that security. We've got to learn from our mistakes, and I think it's imperative the next lease contains a bond that covers in-kind costs. Our staff put a lot of work into Experience Co lease, a lot into Mayfair lease, and we got burnt. We don't want to go down that path again.
Yeah, through the chair, I agree. I think we need to review all elements of that lease and that process, and I do believe a bond plays a part in that. I guess this is about really understanding that market condition. It is an opportunity, but it is a long-term opportunity. We all understand the availability of cash, or the ability to access loans within our community, and I think we need to be very, very real, understand that, and strike a balance between managing risk to our community, but also not wanting to stifle the opportunity as well. So definitely we'll be undertaking a fairly thorough review of that document, and also talking with Council Moore about the makeup and what's important in regards to that site.
Councillor Chewy, you still have the call.
Oh yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Fisher. And I agree with Mr. Mayor Nolan's point as well on the bond. We need some sort of security. We don't want to be left short again. I mean, the community are crying out there for something happening on Dunk. I believe it was busy over Easter, and which is great. But as you said, there is so much potential, and we just need to be seen. We need to make it happen through, and as quickly and as thoroughly, obviously, which is very important for a long term, goal.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that all, Councillor Chewy? General business. Councillor Barnes.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to carry on from Councillor Chewy about how everything's starting to heat up and get busy, I'd just like to report the Mayor and myself travelled to Cardwell on Easter Saturday for the markets. It must have been at least 2,000 people, I think, were estimated to be in town for the whole Easter weekend, staying there, visiting the markets, etc. Conservative figures estimate hundreds of thousands of dollars would have been spent in the area through stall holders, food venues, hotel, community organisations, all shops and accommodation. So to carry on, I think our tourism is well and truly on its way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Any further general? Councillor Chewy.
Sorry, yes, I would just like to share some sad news. On Easter Saturday, Mr. Alan Sellers passed away, and those who really know... Yes, Teresa. Most of us, whether we locals or tourists, would have probably bought bananas at the roadside stall on the farm between Tully and Mission Beach. Mr. Sellers bought the farm in 1968, so it has been running since then, and it's now in the hands of his family. But he continued to play a role in that running of that farm right up until his passing. So on behalf of council, I would just like to pass our condolences on to his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Any further general business? Councillor Baines?
Yeah, B2.
B2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just another follow-up on the trees for tomorrow. The council tree giveaway kicked off today. There are 2 trees per resident available to be picked up for free. We're concentrating on endemic species, councillors. It's about getting increasing our endemic species within our own gardens, and these help attract wildlife, butterflies, lily-pilly, mate. You can make some great lily-pilly jam out of it. I've tried it. I'm sure, councillor, you haven't tried it, I'll get you some. It's really good. It's just a great thing to encourage, Mr. Mayor, and to encourage the community to make a conscious decision about planting some of our endemic species within our region. We do live in the heart of the wet tropics, and a lot of invasive weeds and plants have begun as exotics that have come into the region out of gardeners. No intent for them to turn into weeds, but they can do. So I just encourage everyone who wants to do some gardening, and there's a couple of trees available. They're at the nurseries, which is at the Tully Depot on Anderson Street, I believe. 8 till 3 today, 8 till 3:30 today, 8 till 3:30 tomorrow. Same 2 days next week, Thursday and Friday next week, same hours. And while I have the opportunity, I would like to put a big shout out and thank you to the nursery staff and all the volunteers that have been working in this space, and encourage people to go along. If people want advice on what species attracts which of the wildlife, the crew there can give that advice. I'm not really up to date on that stuff, but all right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. I'll put in a plug for our iconic flora and fauna, the cassowary and the golden pender. So when you pick up your 2 trees, if you drive around at the moment and have a look at the golden penders in full bloom, they are beautiful. What a great emblem to have for Cassowary Coast Council. So a shout out for the golden pender. Any further general business on Councillor Purvin?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Mr. Fisher, River Drive Caravan Park, where are we at with that at this point in time? And will we be getting a new sign erected on the southern side of there to at least let people know it's there? And the front gardens, are those palms going to be cleaned up, the fronds thrown out? When is this going to happen?
Yeah, sure. Through the chair. As I think I outlined last meeting, we've had over 90 applicants for both of the 2 caravan parks, and I expect a recommendation from the team early next week to appoint a caretaker. So that will have a caretaker hopefully on site by the end of April is our current plan. So yes, certainly the signage is going to be updated. We are currently working with a local artist on some basic branding for both of the caravan parks, and the website obviously will also be updated. If anyone's checked out the Cowley Beach Caravan Park website, we expect or plan on having both of the Tully Caravan Park and River Drive with that same website. In regards to the vegetation, the work that's been done is largely the works for Queensland Johnson River vegetation clearing, and yes, there is some still additional clearing to go on within the grounds, and again that work will happen this month as well before the end of April. So. I must say it's nice to see some progress there in terms of vegetation clearing, but still a fair bit more to go to really give that site a good tidy up, and that front garden, and we are going to get the landscapers, as they're taking the green waste up, can also be backloading with some mulch from our tip to really improve those gardens and make them quite intentional rather than I guess just hodgepodge, if that's the acceptable term, because I think it's got an opportunity to look really, really good. So that's the time frames, Councillor.
Thank you, I've got a couple more here, Mr. Fisher, while you're up there. You may not be able to help me with some of these, but if you can't, could you please get back to me? The Ernest Street Road between Coles and Innisfail Hardware. I was told quite some time ago that it'll be completed in April, May this year. Is this still on track? And what will happen there? And when can this happen? It's just every time we get a bit of a downpour, we just seem to be patching it. How long till we can finally alleviate this problem?
Sure. I know Mr. Sanders is working on this project. I think those time frames are still current. The scope of works there, as I understand it, is a pavement reconstruction. So the existing pavement is obviously at the end of its life, so it will be dug out and removed. Whether that is with a profile or an excavator, I don't know that methodology's been determined, but effectively it will all be taken out, a new granular pavement placed, and then an asphalt surfacing put over the top. So I guess what you're seeing there is a consequence of a failed seal, so the water's just going straight into the pavement, and the pavement is also at end of life, so it has got no resistance or strength really left in it once it becomes wet. So still on track for that April-May timeframe, Councillor. And we'll be very looking forward to seeing that job done as well.
So will I. Two more. Up at Darragee, has the land acquisition happened yet from being signed off by the Minister at this point in time? Do you know, or do any other staff in this room know at this point in time?
Sure, we are expecting an announcement on that very, very soon. We have received advice from the department that the government will be considering that matter as part of their gazettal process. I believe it's tomorrow. So we're just confirming with our legal representation about the process from there on, but imagine it should be a pretty quick process thereafter.
Okay, thanks. At least we might get something to move forward with up there. Very last one for me, Mr. Fisher. Mr. Morris Grasso's been calling me in relation to some signage in front of his property on Ernest Street in relation to the vehicles parking there. Would you be able to, or someone from your team be able to get in contact with him as to when the new signage will go up in relation to parking times? He's very disgruntled about it at this point in time, and I'd like to see something done for him.
Thanks. Through the chair, staff are just delivery services team are just checking availability of stock. So I probably should have an answer by the end of by this afternoon in regards to whether we've got those signs in stock. Hopefully we do, because they're just a standard to our parking sign, like through most of our other areas. And if they are in stock, I know the signage crew are out and about working today, so it could be a very quick resolution. If not, we will get back in touch with him with the lead time from our sign supplier and update him, but happy to do that.
Thanks very much for your time, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pavement. Councillor Baines.
If I may just add in on the end around the vegetation management, Mr. Fisher, rather than vegetation clearing. It's great to see that it is going on and continuing. And of course, I encourage the council staff to look at the use of endemic species within these areas as we're putting them back in place after the other vegetation has been managed. Thank you.
That's noted, Councillor Baines. Any further general business? I have two items here. The draft corporate plan will be on our council website in the next 2 weeks, and we're seeking community feedback, and I assure our residents that all community feedback will be considered in the final document. So just put that out there for people watching via live stream. During the week, council received a report on governance levels within council, and the report was prepared by Owen Hitchings, Principal Advisor for the Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning. Various governance checklists were used, and the reviews were conducted as a service to council. It wasn't any audit or anything that was ordered. It's simply a service to all councils. Importantly, and I'm going to ask the CEO to talk to some of the things that we need to improve on in terms of our policy direction, but approximately 90% good compliance was the score that council received. A couple of the areas where there was concerns from the department, and I know for a fact that 2 of the 3 have been already addressed with Owen, that they are the right, a register of interest of one councillor couldn't be found. It was there, that was a technical glitch, and the availability notice on budgeted discretionary funds for councillors. Well, we don't have discretionary funds in our budget. So there's 2 areas where they couldn't find anything because 1, there's no budgetary allocation, and 2, there was a technical glitch with the one register of interest for one councillor. But some other recommendations have been made about how we run our business going forward, and I'm going to leave that to the CEO to put some flesh around, please.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. If I just make a couple of preliminary comments. The corporate plan we expect will be on the website on Monday of next week and will be available for 2 weeks thereafter for public comment. In respect of the audit that was done by the Department of Local Government, councillors will recall that we moved our website from one platform. I'm not an IT expert, so this is in my language. We moved our website from one platform to another, which created an issue with some of the links that you mentioned, and the department, quite rightly, said, well, we couldn't follow those links. That was true. I believe that it's already been cured. Yeah, it's already been cured, so we don't need to worry about that one anymore. To repeat what you said a moment ago, the department did make a comment about our budgeted discretionary funds for councillors. We've previously been silent on it because we don't have any. So I think for the sake of transparency, it's probably worth making a comment in the negative, that is to say we don't have it, so that it's clear rather than just being silent on it. The other ones have to do with a matter that we discussed earlier. The department quite rightly has suggested that when councillors make a choice to leave the meeting room in respect of a declarable conflict of interest, that it would be in the public interest for the councillor to make a comment that he or she is doing so of his or her own volition, so that it is perfectly clear that the meeting hasn't instructed them to leave the room, or anybody else has instructed them to leave the room, that it is done on a voluntary basis. And the other one, and I have to take some responsibility for this, Mr. Chairman, over the last 5 decades, moving into a closed meeting has been described variously as moving into committee as a whole, moving into camera, moving into club, and I tend to use those words interchangeably, those phrases interchangeably. I apologise for that. The department has said that it would be clearer if we actually use the precise words that are in the regulation, which is that we close the meeting for a particular purpose. So my apologies, I'm partly responsible for that. I usually refer to it as moving into committee because that's what it once was. Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chairman, I think it's wonderful that we have achieved good compliance, and particularly insofar as the couple of compliance areas that were noted are not in any way associated with a lack of transparency or poor governance.
And I know the Chair of Governance would like to say a few words. Councillor Bones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would love to say a few words. I was a bit concerned that the CEO was going to steal all the thunder away from this, but look, it's a fantastic result as a desktop review, and I think it just goes towards the efforts that the councillors and the council in general have been putting in over the last few years towards the good governance principles, towards our transparency. And I think that this report coming out of the department and coming from Owen, we all know Owen, and he's a very particular man and he treats things well. I would suggest, with the few simple things we mentioned today, it would push our 90% good compliance up into the mid to high 90s, which I think is a fantastic result for any organisation. So the message I'd like to take out of this today, Mr Mayor, I don't think any organisation would ever achieve 100%. This is a space of continual improvement, but this report, the desktop review, and the works that have been done by this organisation are a great indictment to the work we've been putting towards it. So I would congratulate the councillors and the entire organisation as a whole, because governance rocks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further comment? Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I'd also like to support Jeff's statement there. A question for the CEO. Unfortunately, still no news back from state or federal on dredging or sewage, Mr CEO?
Through you, Mr Chairman, Council is in a position where it's put its funding submission to the federal government. The federal government has come back to us, and Mr Goodman would normally field this question, so I'll rely on Mr Fisher simply to correct me if I'm wrong. Our funding, our business case rather, for the funds of $1.5 million is before the federal government. The federal government's come back to us and asked for some clarification on a couple of points. That clarification has been provided. At such time as the federal government agrees to take the next step, then we'll be in a position to negotiate a funding agreement with the federal government. Typically, that process takes a little time. So does that sufficiently answer your question, Mr Deputy Mayor?
Any further general business? Councillor Pavement.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Mr Hammond, this question's for you. We've gone to day labour for the transfer stations. We've had our jobs advertised internally. Have all positions been filled, and if not, when will they be externally advertised?
Good morning, councillors.
Mr Hammond.
And thank you for that question, Councillor Pavement.
Mr Hammond.
Thank you. The selection of staff internally has gone out to advertisement. The advertisement's closed. We've done our initial interviewing, and we've got a number of preferred applicants. We've done referee checks on all of those, and we're in the process of doing functional checking. Now, the functional checking is making sure that the people that we've selected as preferred applicants can in fact carry out the duties described in the position description. When we get that through that process, which I'm hoping will be in the next week or two, we'll then be making formal offers. Our plan moving forward from there is to go to the external market early next week to advertise the remaining jobs. Now, the structure we provided to council a number of months ago had 24 roles sitting there. The internal applicants have, it was sitting at 10, but there's been a couple of changes in that number in the last little bit created by referee and functional testing. So I think we're sitting at about 8 people that we're going to looking at the moment with preferred applicants. So we have quite a number of roles that will be advertised externally.
Thanks,
so
Mr.
through the chair.
Yeah, Councillor Millwood.
So through the chair, so the rest of those positions are going to go externally, and is that because we can't fill them internally?
Through the correct? Chair, that's exactly right. The first round of applications was for internal applicants, which was for council staff, for our 2 contractors, MAMS and CCUS.
So the other question to that is how many more positions are there going to be now than there are at present?
Councillor, I'm not in a position to answer that. the works of our two contractors have people that are employed across multiple parts of their business. So I don't exactly know what their numbers are. I can tell you that we've got 24 set aside for the structure in waste moving forward and post 1 August.
Okay.
Any further questions for Mr Hammond?
So that's 24 minus approximately 8 or 10, so there could be approximately 14 more jobs. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor. If we use that word approximately, I'm happy to accept that. There is the way we are going through it with the referee checking and the functional testing is showing that some people may not be the people we're after and may not have the capabilities of doing the jobs that we want. And at this stage, we're making sure that when we employ people, they can do the job and they can do the job and they are the appropriate people for us.
Thank you, Mr Hammond. Any further comments or questions? Just in closing the meeting and the excellent report we received from the department on our governance, I want to acknowledge the efforts of Kelly Slattery, who's only been with us a short time, steering the ship in a different direction on policy matters, and I just want to acknowledge her wonderful work and the good report card we received today. We didn't do it. We had somebody steering the ship for us, and it's been reflected on very well by the department. So thank you, Ms Slattery. With those few words, I'll declare the meeting closed at 10:21. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.